My name is Heather, and I am 24 years old. I never thought I would be telling a story about how my sister Catherine broke my rib during a fight in our parents' home. The worst part was not the searing pain or the blood soaking through my shirt. It was watching my mother snatch my phone away as I tried to call for help, laughing as she said those words I will never forget. My father just stood there calling me a drama queen while I struggled to breathe. If they only knew what would happen next. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below, and if this resonates with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of family betrayal and healing. Growing up with Catherine was never easy. Being 3 years older than me, she was always the golden child in our family. While I was just trying to find my place, Catherine was busy collecting accolades and praise from everyone around her. Our childhood home in suburban Boston was filled with trophies, certificates, and framed photographs, nearly all featuring Catherine and her endless achievements. From as early as I can remember, Catherine was positioned as the perfect daughter. She excelled in academics, consistently bringing home straight A's while I struggled with subjects like math and science. By the time she reached high school, she was class president, captain of the debate team, and still maintained her perfect GPA. Teachers would often ask me during roll call, "Are you Catherine Lewis' sister?" Their faces would inevitably fall when they realized I was not the academic powerhouse my sister was. Beyond academics, Catherine was naturally beautiful in ways I never felt I could measure up to. She had our mother's striking blue eyes and our father's height. Her hair was always perfectly styled, her skin clear, and she seemed to effortlessly attract friends and admirers. Meanwhile, I dealt with awkward teenage years braces and the constant shadow of being Catherine Lewis' little sister. The physical aggression began subtly. When we were younger, Catherine would pinch me under the dinner table when I spoke too much, or twist my arm when no one was looking. If I cried out, she would quickly compose herself, putting on an innocent face that my parents always believed. "Heather is just seeking attention," she would say, and they would nod in agreement. As we grew older, the incidents became more calculated. Catherine would borrow my things without asking, and return them damaged if at all. Once she borrowed my favorite sweater, a soft purple cardigan I had saved up for months to buy, and returned it with a large bleach stain. When I confronted her, she simply shrugged and said, "It looks better this way anyway." When I complained to my parents, my mother sighed and said, "You should be flattered she wants to wear your clothes. Besides, it is just a sweater." Another time I found my journal pages torn out and scattered across my bedroom floor. I knew immediately it was Catherine, as she had threatened to expose my private thoughts to her friends the day before, when I refused to let her copy my English assignment, one of the few subjects where I outperformed her. When I stormed into her room demanding an explanation, she calmly denied it. Later at dinner, she suggested that perhaps I had done it myself for attention. My father nodded, saying, "You have always had quite the imagination, Heather." These patterns continued throughout high school. I learned to hide my belongings, to keep my achievements quiet, to avoid Catherine feeling threatened, and to find my own path where I would not be compared to her. I turned to art, discovering a passion for painting and photography that gave me a sense of identity separate from academics where Catherine dominated. My parents rarely attended my art exhibitions, but never missed a single one of Catherine's academic ceremonies. "Art is a nice hobby," my mother would say, "but it is not going to get you into an Ivy League school." Meanwhile, they spent thousands of dollars on prep courses for Catherine LSAT exams. When Catherine was accepted into a prestigious law school, our entire extended family celebrated with an elaborate dinner. My acceptance into art school the same year was acknowledged with a quick, "That is nice, dear," before the conversation returned to Catherine's future legal career. I remembered hiding in the bathroom that night, tears streaming down my face as I heard the champagne corks pop in Catherine's honor. By the time Catherine was in her final year of law school, I had resigned myself to my position in the family. I had moved out after college, finding a small apartment in the city where I worked as a graphic designer while pursuing my painting on the side. I had created a life for myself that was separate from the constant comparisons and dismissals. But the wounds of growing up as the lesser daughter had never fully healed. Little did I know that coming home for what should have been a simple family celebration would reopen those wounds in ways I could never have imagined, and would finally force me to confront the toxic dynamics that had defined our family for as long as I could remember. It was a crisp autumn weekend when I reluctantly drove back to my parents' suburban home for Catherine's pre-graduation celebration. She still had 2 months before officially completing her law degree, but my parents insisted on hosting an early party, since several relatives would be in town for a wedding. I had initially planned to skip the event claiming work commitments, but my mother guilted me into attending with passive-aggressive comments about family loyalty and how I was always too busy for important family moments. I arrived on Friday evening, exhausted after a full day of work and the 90-minute drive. Instead of being greeted with a warm welcome, my mother immediately handed me a list of tasks to complete before the party on Saturday. The caterers need help setting up tomorrow morning, and I need you to pick up the cake and decorations, she instructed, not even offering me a chance to put down my overnight bag. Through the living room doorway, I could see Catherine lounging on the sofa, scrolling through her phone while watching reality television, completely free of responsibilities. "Why am I the only one helping with preparations?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "Catherine is the one graduating, not me." My mother looked at me as if I had suggested something outrageous. "Your sister has been under tremendous stress with her final exams and job interviews. She needs to rest. Besides, you have always been good at these creative things." I bit my tongue and took the list, knowing from experience that arguing would only lead to being labeled as difficult and uncooperative. As I headed upstairs to my old bedroom, now converted into a generic guest room with barely any trace of my existence, I heard my mother fussing over Catherine, asking if she wanted tea or a snack. That night, I unpacked my small suitcase and placed my grandmother necklace on the nightstand. The necklace was a delicate silver piece with a small opal pendant, the only thing I had inherited from my grandmother before she passed away. She had given it to me on my 16th birthday, telling me that the opal reminded her of my spirit, beautiful with hidden depths. It was one of the few times I had felt truly seen by anyone in my family, and the necklace had become my most treasured possession. The next morning was a flurry of activity as I helped set up for the party. I drove across town to pick up the custom cake, carefully navigated traffic with it in my passenger seat, collected helium balloons that obstructed my view all the way home, and spent hours arranging flower centerpieces, while my mother critiqued every detail. Catherine remained conspicuously absent, having gone shopping with her friends. By late afternoon, I was exhausted, but the house looked perfect. I went upstairs to shower and change, before guests arrived, looking forward to the brief moment of peace. As I reached for my grandmother necklace to complete my outfit, my heart sank. The nightstand was empty. I searched the entire room, looking under furniture and checking if it had fallen behind the nightstand, but the necklace was nowhere to be found. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach as I remembered Catherine admiring the necklace at our last family gathering. Without bothering to change out of my casual clothes, I marched down the hall to Catherine's room and knocked firmly on the door. No answer. I tried the handle and found it unlocked. I hesitated for only a moment before entering. It felt invasive, but my necklace was too important to ignore. I scanned her meticulously organized room, but saw no sign of my jewelry. Just as I was about to leave, a notification lit up Catherine's phone where it lay charging on her desk. I normally would never look at someone else's phone, but the preview showed a photo. A photo of Catherine with her friends at a bar, clearly from the previous night, and around her neck was my opal necklace. My hands shook as I picked up the phone. I swiped to see the full image, and there was no doubt it was my necklace. The caption read, "Getting some early graduation gifts." The comments from her friends complimented her on the gorgeous vintage piece. I was still staring at the phone when I heard the front door open, and Catherine's voice float up the stairs. I quickly put the phone down and waited in her room, my anger building with each passing second. When she appeared in the doorway, shopping bags in hand, she froze at the sight of me. "What are you doing in my room?" she demanded, her voice immediately taking on the authoritative tone she had perfected over years of debate team. "Where is my necklace?" I asked directly, crossing my arms over my chest. Catherine's expression remained neutral as she placed her shopping bags on the bed. "What necklace?" "Grandma, opal necklace. The one you were wearing in the photos from last night." A flicker of surprise crossed her face before she composed herself. "That is my necklace. Mom gave it to me last month." The audacity of her lie made my blood boil. "That is absolutely not true. Grandma gave that necklace to me when I turned 16. You know that." Catherine shrugged, turning away to unpack her shopping bags. "Well, I guess she forgot, and gave one to each of us. The one I have is mine." "I saw the photo on your phone," I admitted. "You were wearing it last night. You took it from my room." Her head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "You went through my phone. What is wrong with you? That is a complete invasion of privacy." She was attempting to shift the focus, a tactic she had used successfully our entire lives. But this time I would not be diverted. "Return my necklace, Catherine. It is the only thing I have from Grandma." "You should not have been snooping in my room or my phone," she countered, her voice rising. "Maybe if you were not such a jealous little sister all the time, people would give you nice things too." The conversation rapidly deteriorated from there. Catherine continued to deny taking the necklace, then switched to claiming it was rightfully hers, then accused me of being materialistic and obsessed with stuff while she was focused on building a meaningful career. With each shifting argument, my frustration grew. By the time our parents called us down for dinner before the guests arrived, we were barely speaking. The tension was palpable as we sat at the dining table, my mother chattering excitedly about Catherine's job prospects, while my father nodded approvingly. Neither of them seemed to notice or care about the anger simmering between their daughters. When my mother asked me to help serve the appetizers, while Catherine continued sitting, something inside me snapped. "Why is it that I am always the one helping, while Catherine does nothing?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. My mother looked startled. "Heather, this is your sister celebration. Why are you trying to create drama?" "This is not about the party," I said, placing my napkin on the table. "This is about Catherine taking my grandmother necklace without permission, and then lying about it." My parents exchanged confused glances before my father sighed heavily. "Not this again. You have always been jealous of your sister." "She went through my phone," Catherine interjected, her voice carefully calibrated to sound hurt. "I came home and found her snooping in my room." And just like that, the narrative shifted. My mother began lecturing me about respecting privacy, while my father shook his head disapprovingly. Not once did they address the actual theft of my necklace. As dinner progressed, the tension continued to build, setting the stage for what would become the most painful confrontation of my life. The guests had finally left after an evening of celebrating Catherine's impending law school graduation. Throughout the party, I had maintained a polite facade, serving drinks, taking photos, and engaging in small talk while avoiding my sister as much as possible. The necklace issue remained unresolved, with Catherine wearing a different piece of jewelry to the party, and my opal pendant nowhere to be seen. As I cleared the last of the dessert plates from the dining room, I overheard my mother and Catherine in the kitchen, their voices low but audible. "I cannot believe Heather tried to make such a scene before the party," my mother said. "Sometimes I wonder if she does these things on purpose to take attention away from you." Catherine's sigh was theatrical. "She has always been this way, Mom. Remember when she claimed I tore up her journal in high school? Or when she accused me of deliberately spilling punch on her dress before prom? She has always made up stories to make me look bad." Their words hit me like a physical blow. Not only was Catherine continuing to lie, but she was rewriting history, painting me as the perpetual antagonist. The destroyed journal had been real. The ruined prom dress had been real. All of it had been real. But over the years, Catherine had managed to convince our parents, and perhaps even herself, that I was the problem. I stepped into the kitchen, still holding a stack of plates. "I did not make anything up," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the anger coursing through me. "You took my necklace, Catherine. I want it back. Catherine rolled her eyes dramatically, while my mother made an exasperated sound. Not this again, Heather. The party is over. Can we please have one family gathering without your jealousy issues? This is not about jealousy, I insisted, placing the plates on the counter with more force than necessary. This is about Catherine taking something that does not belong to her, something irreplaceable to me, and everyone acting like I am crazy for being upset about it. Catherine crossed her arms, leaning against the refrigerator with casual confidence. If it meant so much to you, maybe you should have taken better care of it. Something in her tone made it clear she knew exactly what she had done. There was a smugness, a certainty that she would get away with it, just as she had gotten away with everything else throughout our lives. And she was right. Our parents were already sighing and exchanging looks that clearly said Heather is overreacting again. Just tell me where it is, I said, stepping closer to her. That is all I want. Tell me where my necklace is, and I will leave it alone. I do not have your precious necklace, Catherine replied, enunciating each word as if speaking to a child. Maybe you lost it. Maybe you sold it to pay your rent. How would I know? The insinuation that I would sell my grandmother gift, coupled with the dig about my financial situation, compared to her lucrative law career prospects, was the final straw. I moved toward her, my voice rising. Stop lying. I saw the photo, Catherine. You were wearing it last night. Catherine straightened up, using her slight height advantage to look down at me. You need to back off, she warned. You are embarrassing yourself. My mother stepped between us. Girls, that is enough. Heather, I think you need to calm down and stop accusing your sister. Of course you take her side, I said bitterly. You always take her side. My father entered the kitchen, attracted by our raised voices. What is going on in here? Heather is having one of her moments, my mother explained dismissively. I turned to my father, a last desperate attempt to find an ally. Dad, Catherine took Grandma's necklace, the one she gave me for my 16th birthday. I just want it back. My father sighed, running a hand over his face. Can we not do this now? It has been a long day, and I am tired of the constant bickering. This is not bickering, I exclaimed, frustration, making my voice crack. This is about something that matters to me, and no one in this family seems to care. Catherine stepped around our mother, moving closer to me. You always do this, she hissed. You always try to make everything about you. This weekend was supposed to be about my accomplishments, but somehow you have managed to turn it into another pity party for Heather. I did not ask for any of this, I shot back. I just want my necklace returned. Get over it, Catherine snapped, giving me a small shove with her hand. It is just a stupid necklace. The physical contact, however, slight, broke something loose inside me. Years of suppressed anger and hurt surged to the surface. I stepped forward, getting in her face. Do not touch me. Just admit you took it. Catherine shoved me again, harder this time. Get out of my face. I stumbled backward, but caught myself on the counter. Our parents were calling for us to stop, but their voices seemed distant as I focused entirely on my sister and the rage contorting her features. I had seen that look before many times throughout our childhood, always followed by some form of pain for me. Give me back my necklace, I demanded again, my voice shaking. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Catherine's face twisted with fury as she lunged forward, shoving me with both hands. I lost my balance, tumbling backward. As I fell, I felt a sharp, explosive pain as my side collided with the corner of the marble kitchen island. The impact knocked the wind from my lungs and sent me sprawling onto the tile floor. For a moment, everything went silent as I gasped for air. The pain in my side was unlike anything I had ever experienced, a white-hot agony that seemed to radiate through my entire body. I curled inward, one hand instinctively going to the source of pain. When I pulled it away, my fingers were smeared with blood. Oh my God, I heard my mother gasp. I looked up to see 3 faces staring down at me with varying expressions. My mother with shock, my father with confusion, and Catherine with something that looked disturbingly like satisfaction, before she quickly masked it with concern. She fell into the counter, Catherine said immediately. I barely touched her. I tried to speak to contradict her, but could only manage a wheezing cough that sent fresh waves of pain through my torso. I fumbled for my phone in my pocket, my thoughts scattered but focused on one clear objective: I needed help. As I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and tried to dial 911, my mother suddenly swooped down and snatched it from my hand. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice high and tight. "Calling. Police," I managed to gasp between painful breaths. My mother let out a short, incredulous laugh that chilled me to the core. "Do not be ridiculous, Heather. You are not calling the police. Do you have any idea what that would do to your sister's career? She is about to become a lawyer." I stared up at her in disbelief, as she continued, "It is just a little accident. You probably just bruised yourself." "Mom," I wheezed, I think. "My rib. Broken." "Do not be such a drama queen," my father interjected, though he looked uncomfortable as he noticed the blood soaking through my shirt. "People do not bleed from bruises." "She must have cut herself on something when she fell," Catherine offered helpfully. "Maybe there was something on the floor." I struggled to sit up each movement, sending shards of pain through my side. "She pushed me," I insisted. "On purpose." "I was defending myself," Catherine countered immediately. "She was in my face screaming at me." My mother knelt beside me, but instead of checking my injury, she held my phone away from me. "Listen to me, Heather. You are not calling the police or an ambulance. You will ruin your sister's future over a stupid accident. Is that what you want? To destroy everything she has worked for because you lost your balance?" I looked from my mother to my father, searching for any sign of concern for my well-being, but found none. Their worry was entirely for Catherine and the potential consequences she might face. "I need hospital," I managed to say. "I will drive you," my father offered reluctantly, "but you need to calm down and stop with the accusations." "We need to get our story straight first," my mother said, looking at Catherine. "It was an accident. Heather tripped and fell into the counter. That is what happened." As I lay there on the kitchen floor bleeding and struggling to breathe, I watched my family collaborate to create a narrative that protected Catherine at my expense. The reality of my situation hit me with more force than the marble counter, had I was completely alone even while surrounded by the people who should have cared for me most. "I can drive myself," I said, using the counter to pull myself upright despite the searing pain. The movement caused fresh blood to seep through my shirt, but I was beyond caring. "Do not be stupid," my father said. "You cannot drive like that." "Watch me," I replied, snatching my phone back from my distracted mother and staggering toward the door. "Heather, stop being so dramatic," my mother called after me. "It is just a rib. You will be fine." As I fumbled for my car keys, my father called out, "This is why no one takes you seriously, Heather. You have always been such a drama queen." Catherine's voice was the last thing I heard as I left the house. "See what I have had to deal with all these years. She always has to make everything about her." I made it to my car, each step an exercise in agony, determined to get myself to a hospital, and away from the family that had just shown me in the clearest terms possible exactly where their priorities lay. And it was not with me. It had never been with me. The drive to the hospital was a blur of pain and determination. Every breath felt like fire in my chest, and the steering wheel grew slick under my blood-tinged fingers. Twice I had to pull over, when the pain became overwhelming, leaning my forehead against the wheel, and focusing on simply inhaling and exhaling. What should have been a 15-minute drive took me nearly 45 minutes, but I eventually pulled into the emergency room parking lot, leaving my car haphazardly parked across 2 spaces. The fluorescent lights of the ER waiting room made me squint as I stumbled to the reception desk, one arm wrapped protectively around my torso. The triage nurse took one look at my blood-stained shirt and pale face and immediately called for assistance. Within minutes, I was being wheeled into an examination room, bombarded with questions about what had happened. I fell against a counter, I said mechanically, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. Even now, miles away from my family, I was protecting Catherine. The habit was so deeply ingrained that it happened automatically. The doctor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, gently helped me remove my shirt to examine the injury. I heard her sharp intake of breath when she saw the angry purple bruise spreading across my ribs, centered around a deep laceration where the corner of the marble countertop had broken the skin. "This is a significant injury," she said, pressing carefully around the bruised area and noting my winces. "We need to get some X-rays to check for fractures." As she worked cleaning the wound and preparing it for stitches, she asked again, "You said you fell against a counter." I nodded, avoiding her eyes. "The angle of this injury is unusual for a simple fall," she noted, her voice neutral but searching. "Did someone push you?" I hesitated, the truth hovering on my lips. But years of conditioning held me back. "I lost my balance," I said finally. She nodded slowly, clearly unconvinced but not pushing further. "We will give you something for the pain before we start the stitches." The X-rays confirmed what I had already suspected: a fractured rib, along with significant soft tissue damage. As the doctor sutured the laceration, now mercifully numbed by local anesthetic, a nurse named Melanie assisted occasionally, making gentle conversation to distract me from the procedure. "Is there someone we can call for you?" she asked. "Someone who can drive you home?" I shook my head, wincing, as the movement pulled at my injured side. "No, I am fine. I drove myself here." Melanie and the doctor exchanged a look that I could not quite interpret. "You should not be driving with this injury," the doctor said firmly. "The pain medication we are going to prescribe will make it unsafe for you to be behind the wheel." "I will call a taxi," I replied, though the thought of going back to my parents' house made me feel physically ill. As the doctor finished the last stitch and applied a dressing, she was called away to another patient. Melanie stayed behind to help me into a hospital gown, since my shirt was ruined with blood. "The doctor has to file a report for injuries like this," Melanie said quietly as she worked. "Standard procedure." I felt a flutter of panic. "A report?" She nodded, her eyes meeting mine. "When we see injuries that could be the result of violence, we are required to document it." "It was an accident," I insisted, the familiar words feeling hollow. Melanie's hands stilled on the ties of the gown. "I had a sister who used to accidentally hurt me too," she said softly. "For years I covered for her, made excuses, blamed myself." I looked up sharply, surprised by the personal revelation. "I recognized the look in your eyes when the doctor asked if someone pushed you," she continued. "It is the same look I used to see in the mirror." My throat tightened, unexpected tears threatening to spill over. "What happened?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Eventually I stopped protecting someone who was hurting me," she said simply. "It was the hardest and best decision I ever made." She handed me a card with a phone number. "This is for a support group for people dealing with family violence. You do not have to call, but I wish someone had given me this years ago." I clutched the card, nodding wordlessly as the first tears escaped. "Your rib will heal in about 6 weeks," Melanie added, her voice gentle. "But the other injuries, the ones no one can see, those take longer, and they do not start healing until you acknowledge them." After receiving care instructions, pain medication, and a follow-up appointment, I called a rideshare service, rather than attempting to drive home. The thought of returning to my parents' house filled me with dread, but I had left my overnight bag there, and I needed clean clothes before making the drive back to my apartment in the city. It was nearly midnight when I arrived back at the house. I had hoped everyone would be asleep, allowing me to slip in, gather my things, and leave without confrontation. But as the car pulled away, I saw that lights were still on in the living room. I entered quietly, moving gingerly to accommodate my bandaged torso. My parents and Catherine were sitting in the living room, their hushed conversation stopping abruptly when I appeared in the doorway. "Where have you been?" my mother demanded, as if I were a teenager breaking curfew rather than an injured adult returning from the hospital. "Getting medical attention," I replied flatly. "You could have just said you were going to the hospital," my father said, his tone suggesting I had somehow inconvenienced them. "We were worried." The absurdity of his statement nearly made me laugh, but the movement would have been too painful. "Were you?" "Because no one called or texted to check on me." An uncomfortable silence followed, broken only when Catherine asked with artificial concern, "Are you okay?" I looked at her directly, taking in her perfectly composed expression, not a hint of genuine remorse visible. "I have a fractured rib and needed 7 stitches. My mother gasped softly. "Surely you are exaggerating." "Would you like to see the medical report?" I asked coldly. "Or the stitches?" "There is no need for that," my father interjected quickly. "Accidents happen. The important thing is that you are okay." "I am not okay," I said quietly. "I am injured, and none of you seem to care. You were more worried about Catherine potential legal problems than about the fact that I was bleeding on your kitchen floor." "That is not fair," my mother protested. "We offered to drive you to the hospital." After trying to convince me not to go at all, I reminded her. After laughing and telling me not to call for help because it might ruin Catherine's future. "You are taking things out of context," my father said, frowning. "Everyone was upset. Things were said in the heat of the moment." I shook my head, too tired and in too much pain to argue. "I am going to get my things and leave." "Now, it is the middle of the night," my mother said. "That is ridiculous. You can barely stand up straight. Stay until morning at least." "I am not staying in this house another minute," I replied. As I turned to head upstairs, I overheard Catherine whisper to our parents, "Should we be worried about her talking to the police?" My father murmured back, "I do not think she would go that far. She knows it would tear this family apart." My mother added, "We just need to make sure she understands that it was an accident. If she starts telling people Catherine attacked her, it could ruin everything." Their words followed me up the stairs, each one a fresh wound to my already battered heart. In my room, I quickly gathered my belongings, moving on autopilot, despite the pain that accompanied every motion. As I zipped my overnight bag, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. Pale, disheveled, with dark circles under my eyes, and a hospital bracelet still around my wrist. But beyond the physical evidence of the evening's trauma, I saw something else in my expression. A clarity that had not been there before. For years I had allowed myself to believe that somewhere beneath the favoritism and dismissal, my family still loved me. That if things were truly dire, they would prioritize my well-being. Tonight had shattered that illusion completely. The truth was stark and undeniable in the hierarchy of our family. I was at the bottom. My pain was inconvenient, my needs secondary, my voice unheard. As I made my way back downstairs with my bag, my family fell silent once again. No one offered to help me carry my things despite my obvious difficulty. No one suggested it might be unsafe for me to drive in my condition. No one apologized. "I will be in touch about the necklace," I said, as I reached the door, a final reminder that I had not forgotten the catalyst for the evening's events. "For God's sake, Heather, let it go," my father said, with exasperation. "Is a piece of jewelry really worth all this drama?" I looked at him for a long moment. This man who had never stood up for me, who had always taken the path of least resistance, even when it meant dismissing his younger daughter's legitimate grievances. "It was never about the necklace," I said quietly. "It was about being valued, about being heard, about being treated with basic respect." With that, I walked out the door, leaving behind not just my childhood home, but the last lingering hope that my family would ever be what I needed them to be. The realization was painful, but within that pain was the seed of something else, something that felt surprisingly like freedom. The week following the incident was a haze of pain medication, fitful sleep, and quiet contemplation in my small apartment. Each breath reminded me of what had happened, the physical pain, a constant companion to my emotional turmoil. I called in sick to work using vacation days I had been saving for a trip I now had no interest in taking. Instead, I used the time to think about my life and my family. On the third day, when the fog of prescription painkillers began to clear, I found myself pulling out boxes of old journals from the back of my closet. I had been a dedicated diarist from the age of 10, documenting my thoughts and experiences through adolescence and into early adulthood. I had stopped the practice after college, but years of entries remained preserved in these cardboard boxes. I sat cross-legged on my living room floor, surrounded by notebooks of various sizes and colors, and began to read. The entries started innocently enough, the musings of a child about school and friends. But as I progressed through the years, a disturbing pattern emerged. Page after page, detailed incidents with Catherine's small cruelties that individually might seem like typical sibling rivalry, but collectively painted a picture of sustained emotional and sometimes physical abuse. At 12, Catherine told my friends, "I still wet the bed." Everyone laughed at me at lunch. When I told Mom, she said I should learn to take a joke. At 14, Catherine ripped my science project the night before it was due because she said it was better than hers. Dad said I should have kept it in my room if it was so important. At 16, Catherine pushed me down the stairs today when I was wearing my new shoes. She said it was an accident, but she was smiling. My ankle is swollen, and I missed track practice. Mom said I should be more careful. The entries continued, a catalog of injuries, humiliations, and gaslighting. Most disturbing was how clearly I had documented my parents' responses, their consistent pattern of dismissing my experiences and protecting Catherine. Even at a young age, I had recognized the injustice of it, though I had lacked the vocabulary to name it as such. As I read, I began to make notes on a legal pad, creating a timeline of the most significant incidents. It was like assembling pieces of a puzzle I had been trying to solve my entire life. Why did my family treat me this way? What made Catherine's behavior acceptable to them? How had I normalized this treatment to the point where I still sought their approval? The next day, fueled by a newfound determination, I reached out to some old high school classmates through social media. People I remembered Catherine having conflicts with people who might have seen the side of her that my parents refused to acknowledge. Jordan, who had been on the debate team with Catherine, responded first. "Your sister? Yeah, she was brilliant but terrifying. She threatened to spread rumors about me sleeping with a teacher when I was chosen as team captain instead of her. I ended up stepping down because I was scared of what she might do." Lily, who had briefly dated a boy Catherine was interested in, wrote, "I always wondered if you knew how cruel she could be. She slashed my tires once and left a note saying, 'Stay away from him or worse will happen.' I never told anyone because I was afraid of her." Rachel, once Catherine's best friend, until a mysterious falling out, was initially hesitant, but eventually agreed to meet me for coffee. She arrived at the cafe looking nervous, fidgeting with her wedding ring, as she sat across from me. "I never thought I would talk about this," she said after we exchanged awkward greetings. "But when I got your message, something told me it was time." "Talk about what I asked, though." I already suspected. Rachel took a deep breath. "Your sister and I were inseparable junior and senior year, you probably remember. What you might not know is that she became controlling. She would get furious if I spent time with other friends, would read my texts when I was not looking, even threatened to tell my parents about a party I went to if I did not stop talking to this guy she thought was taking up too much of my time." I nodded, recognizing the pattern. "Did it ever get physical?" Rachel hesitated, then rolled up her sleeve to reveal a faint scar on her forearm. "We got into an argument at her house. She threw a glass paperweight at me, said it was an accident, that she was just gesturing, and it slipped. But the look in her eyes when it happened," she shuddered slightly. "I knew it was not an accident." "Did you tell anyone?" I asked. "I told my mom." "She called your parents." Rachel's expression turned bitter. Your mom said I must have provoked Catherine, that she would never do something like that intentionally. Your dad suggested I might have hurt myself for attention. After that, I just stayed away. Hearing Rachel's story was like looking in a mirror, the same patterns of behavior, the same dismissal and protection from my parents. It confirmed what I had always suspected, but had been conditioned to doubt. Catherine's behavior was not normal, and my parents' enabling of it had allowed it to escalate over years. My investigation continued, expanding to include Daniel, Catherine's ex-boyfriend from her undergraduate years. He was the most reluctant of all to speak with me, and when we finally connected by phone, his voice was guarded. I do not like talking about that time in my life, he said after I explained why I was reaching out. It was a dark period. Please, I said. I need to understand what happened. He was silent for so long I thought he might have hung up. Then, your sister is the only person who has ever made me afraid for my safety. She was charming, brilliant, the perfect girlfriend until she was not. She had these rages that came out of nowhere. Once she threw my laptop across the room because I liked a female classmate's post on social media. Another time she locked me on the balcony of her apartment in the middle of winter, because I was 10 minutes late coming home. I was out there for 3 hours before she let me back in. Did you ever tell anyone? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Who would believe me? He replied. She was this successful, beautiful woman, and I was just some guy. And she was so good at making it seem like I was the problem. By the end, I was apologizing to her for making her angry enough to hurt me. Each conversation added another piece to the puzzle, another confirmation that Catherine's pattern of behavior extended far beyond our sibling relationship. It was a fundamental aspect of who she was, enabled and protected by our parents since childhood. Armed with this knowledge, I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer, not to press charges, but to understand my options. The lawyer, a compassionate woman named Beverly, listened carefully to my story and reviewed the timeline I had compiled. What you are describing is a clear pattern of domestic violence, she said, matter-of-factly. The most recent incident with your rib would likely qualify as assault. Could I press charges? I asked, more to understand than with any intention of doing so. You could, she confirmed. The medical documentation supports your account, and if these other witnesses were willing to testify about the pattern of behavior, you would have a strong case. I nodded, absorbing this information. And if I did? Your sister would likely face criminal charges. With her pending bar admission, it would almost certainly impact her legal career. I sat with that thought, turning it over in my mind. Part of me, the wounded part that had endured years of abuse and dismissal, found satisfaction in the idea of Catherine finally facing consequences. But another part, the part that had been conditioned to protect the family image at all costs, recoiled from it. I am not sure that is what I want, I said finally. Beverly nodded, understanding in her eyes. Many victims of family violence feel the same way. The goal is not necessarily punishment, but safety and healing. Let me ask you this. What do you want to happen? It was a question I had been asking myself since the moment I left my parents' house that night. What did I want? Justice, revenge, recognition. I want to be free, I said, the words emerging with surprising clarity. Free from the patterns, free from the fear, free from constantly seeking validation from people who will never give it. Then, that is what we work toward, Beverly replied. You do not have to file charges to set boundaries or to remove yourself from toxic relationships. In the days that followed, I formulated a plan not for revenge, but for liberation. I began searching for a new apartment in a different neighborhood, somewhere Catherine would not know to look for me. I updated my resume and started applying for jobs that would take me further from the graphic design agency where I currently worked, expanding my search to neighboring cities. I also found a therapist specializing in family trauma and emotional abuse, making an appointment for the following week. And I joined an online support group for survivors of family violence, finding unexpected comfort in the stories of others who had walked similar paths. I did not call my parents or respond to their increasingly irritated messages asking why I was still making such a big deal about what had happened. I did not engage with Catherine's single text message asking if she could borrow my food processor for a dinner party she was hosting. Instead, I focused on building a future where I would no longer be defined by my role as the family scapegoat, where my worth would not be measured against Catherine accomplishments, where my pain would not be dismissed as drama. As my physical wound began to heal, so too did I begin the process of healing emotionally, of recognizing the patterns that had shaped my life and making the conscious choice to break them. The path forward was not clear, and I knew it would not be easy, but for the first time in my life, I was choosing myself, my safety, and my well-being over the facade of family harmony that had cost me so much. The invitation to Catherine Law School graduation arrived 6 weeks after the incident, an embossed card with gold lettering that seemed to mock me from my new mailbox. I had moved into a small but bright apartment across town, changed my phone number, and started a new job at a marketing firm that valued my creative input in ways my previous employer never had. The physical pain of my injury had subsided to a dull ache that only bothered me when I laughed too hard or moved too quickly, but the emotional wounds were still raw. I placed the invitation on my kitchen counter and stared at it for 3 days before making my decision. My therapist, Dr. Natalie, had encouraged me to trust my instincts, to recognize that I did not owe my family my presence simply because of blood ties. Family is earned, she had told me in our last session, and yours has not earned your loyalty or your forgiveness. Still, something inside me needed closure, a final opportunity to stand in my truth before walking away completely. I RSVP'd yes to the graduation ceremony, but declined the dinner invitation, knowing that the public setting of the university would provide some protection from confrontation. The morning of the graduation, I dressed carefully in a simple blue dress that made me feel confident, and collected my grandmother necklace, which had mysteriously appeared in my old bedroom at my parents' house after I moved out, though no one ever acknowledged taking it. I had retrieved it during a brief visit when I knew everyone would be out, using my old key to enter and exit without interaction. The ceremony itself was predictably celebratory. Catherine, resplendent in her cap and gown, beamed as she accepted her diploma. My parents, seated in a reserved section for families of honors graduates, applauded enthusiastically. I sat alone several rows behind them, unnoticed, until the ceremony concluded and families began to gather on the lawn for photographs. My mother spotted me first, her expression cycling rapidly from surprise to wariness to a forced smile. "Heather, we did not know if you would come. You have been so difficult to reach lately." My father nodded stiffly beside her. "Nice of you to show up for your sister big day." Catherine approached, still wearing her graduation regalia, her face a careful mask of polite surprise. "I did not expect to see you here." "Congratulations," I said, simply maintaining a comfortable distance from all of them. An awkward silence settled over our small group, at odds with the jubilant celebrations happening around us. "We are having a small reception at the house," my mother finally said. "Nothing fancy, just family and a few close friends. You should come." It was not a genuine invitation, but a public performance of family unity offered only because others might overhear. "Actually, I already have plans," I replied calmly, "but I wanted to congratulate Catherine in person." "Plans more important than your sister graduation party?" my father asked, his tone carrying a familiar edge of disapproval. "Yes," I said, simply offering no further explanation or apology. Catherine's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of the anger I knew so well, passing across her features before she controlled it. "Well, thanks for coming to the ceremony at least. Though it would have been nice to have some support at the party too." "Support?" I repeated, the word hanging in the air between us. "That is an interesting choice of word." My mother glanced around nervously, clearly concerned about making a scene. "Perhaps we could discuss this another time." "There will not be another time," I said quietly. "That is actually why I came today, to say goodbye. Goodbye, my father echoed. Do not be dramatic, Heather. I am not being dramatic, I replied. I am making a choice to remove myself from a situation that has been harmful to me for as long as I can remember. Catherine let out an exaggerated sigh. Here we go again, always making everything about you. Catherine, my mother cautioned, glancing around at nearby families who might overhear. I took a deep breath, centering myself. I did not come here to argue or to disrupt your celebration. I came because I needed to say this to your faces, not in a letter or a phone call. I am stepping away from this family dynamic. I will not be attending holidays or family events. I will not be available for the usual patterns of criticism and dismissal. I am choosing myself, my well-being, and my future. My father frowned deeply. This is ridiculous. You cannot just decide to not be part of the family. Actually, I can, I replied, and I am. Because of one little fight, Catherine scoffed. You are really going to hold a grudge over an accident? I looked at her directly, holding her gaze. It was not an accident. We both know that. And it was not just one fight. It was a lifetime of abuse that everyone in this family normalized and enabled. Abuse, my mother hissed, stepping closer to me. Keep your voice down. How dare you throw around words like that? How dare I speak the truth, I asked. For once in my life I am daring to say what really happened, instead of accepting the version of reality that protects Catherine at my expense. Catherine stepped forward, her voice low and threatening. You have no idea what you are doing right now. I have worked too hard to let you ruin things with your petty jealousy. I recorded our last conversation, I said quietly. The one where you admitted taking my necklace and shoving me into the counter. The one where you threatened to make my life hell if I ever told anyone what really happened. Her face drained of color. You are bluffing. Am I? I held her gaze steadily. Would you like to find out? My mother grabbed my arm, her fingers digging painfully into my skin. Stop this right now. People are watching. I gently but firmly removed her hand. I am not going to press charges. I am not going to share the recording with anyone. I do not want revenge or justice or even an apology anymore. I just want peace. And the only way I can have that is by walking away. You cannot just cut us off, my father protested, his voice rising slightly. We are your family. Biology made us related, I replied. But your choices have made us strangers. I deserve better than what this family has offered me, and I am finally brave enough to seek it elsewhere. Catherine laughed, though the sound held no humor. So dramatic. Always have to make a scene. Do not you. Go ahead and leave then. See if anyone notices you are gone. I looked at her, this sister, who had caused me so much pain, and felt a strange sense of pity. I hope you find whatever it is that drives you to hurt people. I really do. But I will not be one of your victims anymore. With that, I turned and walked away, my steps lighter than they had been in years. Behind me, I could hear my mother calling my name, my father demanding I come back, but for once their voices held no power over me. That evening, as I sat in a small bistro with friends who had become more of a family to me than my biological one ever had been, my phone buzzed with messages from my parents. Accusations of disloyalty, demands for apologies, threats of being cut off financially, though I had been supporting myself for years. I silenced the notifications without reading them fully. Across the table, my friend Diane raised her glass. To new beginnings, she said, her eyes reflecting understanding of what the day had cost me. To freedom, I added, touching my glass to hers. For the first time since that night in my parents' kitchen, I took a deep breath that did not hurt. The physical wound had healed, and now finally the emotional healing could truly begin. 1 year passed, then another. The seasons changed, and with them my life transformed in ways both subtle and profound. My new apartment became a true home, filled with artwork I had created during late-night painting sessions that served as therapy as much as creative expression. My career flourished at the marketing firm where I eventually led my own team of designers, and most importantly, I built a circle of friends who valued me, supported me, and never made me question my worth. The first few months after Catherine graduation had been challenging. My parents alternated between angry messages demanding I stop this nonsense and guilt-inducing pleas about family obligation. Catherine herself made a few attempts at contact, ranging from seemingly casual invitations to coffee to late-night accusatory texts when those invitations were declined. I maintained my boundaries firmly, but without malice responding, only to say that I needed space and time. Eventually, the messages slowed, then stopped altogether. For 6 months there was silence from my family, a silence that initially felt like rejection, but gradually transformed into peace. I used that time to work intensively with my therapist, unpacking decades of normalized abuse and emotional neglect. What you experienced is often called the scapegoat dynamic, Dr. Natalie explained during one particularly insightful session. Families with narcissistic patterns often designate one child as the problem and the emotional dumping ground for the entire family system. Your sister was the golden child, while you were assigned the role of scapegoat. Learning these patterns gave me a framework to understand my experiences, to recognize that what happened was not my fault and was never about my value as a person. The knowledge was liberating, allowing me to release the shame I had carried for years. I also joined a support group for survivors of family abuse, where I met others with similar stories. Sharing my experiences and hearing theirs helped me realize I was not alone, that families like mine existed everywhere, hidden behind facades of normalcy and success. Through these connections, I began volunteering with a local organization that provided resources for young people escaping abusive homes. It was through this volunteer work that I met Valerie, a social worker, whose compassion and insight immediately drew me to her. Our friendship developed naturally, evolving into something deeper over shared meals and long conversations about healing and growth. By the 18-month mark after cutting ties with my family, we were dating my first healthy romantic relationship after years of choosing partners who replicated the dismissive patterns I had grown up with. 2 years after Catherine graduation, on a crisp autumn day, much like the one when my rib had been broken, my phone rang with my mother number. I stared at the screen for long moments, considering whether to answer. Valerie, sitting beside me on the couch, squeezed my hand in silent support. "Whatever you decide is okay," she said softly. I took a deep breath and answered. "Heather," my mother voice sounded older, hesitant. "Thank you for picking up." "Hi, Mom," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "How are you?" she asked, the familiar question now, laden with unfamiliar weight. "I am well," I said truthfully. "Very well, actually." A pause, then. "That is good. I am glad to hear it." The conversation that followed was stilted, careful, nothing like the easy flow of communication that should exist between mother and daughter. But beneath the awkwardness, I detected something new in her voice. A uncertainty, perhaps even a humility that had never been there before. "Your father and I have been seeing a family therapist," she said eventually. "It was suggested by Catherine's psychologist." This revelation surprised me. "Catherine is seeing a psychologist?" "Yes," my mother confirmed. "She has been diagnosed with some issues, personality-related. She is working on them." I remained silent, processing this information. "Our therapist suggested that we may have enabled certain behaviors," my mother continued, each word seemingly difficult for her to voice. "That we may have contributed to an unhealthy dynamic between you girls." It was as close to an acknowledgement of wrongdoing as I had ever heard from her, though it still stopped short of a true apology. "I appreciate you telling me that," I said carefully. "We would like to see you," she said. "If you are willing. Not at the house. Maybe somewhere neutral. The therapist has offered to mediate." I considered the invitation, checking in with my own feelings. The anger that had once burned so fiercely had cooled over time, replaced by a steady determination to protect my hard-won peace. "I am not ready for that," I told her honestly. I am still working through a lot and I need more time. She did not argue or attempt to guilt me another small but significant change. I understand. Maybe someday. Maybe, I agreed. But I cannot make any promises. After we hung up, I sat quietly absorbing the conversation. Valerie waited patiently beside me. "How do you feel?" she asked eventually. Surprised, I admitted, but also cautiously optimistic. Not about reconciliation necessarily, but about the possibility that they are finally facing reality. "That is huge," Valerie said, "for them and for you." In the months that followed, I received occasional updates from my mother. Catherine was continuing therapy addressing her anger issues and manipulative behaviors. My parents were coming to terms with their role in enabling her and dismissing me. My father, always the more resistant to psychological concepts, was struggling but trying according to my mother. I maintained my distance, but allowed small points of contact, brief phone conversations every few weeks, always with clear boundaries, and always ended when I felt my peace being disrupted. I did not visit their home, did not attend family events, did not rush to rebuild bridges that had been burned through years of mistreatment. Instead, I focused on building my own life, one based on mutual respect, genuine care, and the freedom to be my authentic self. I continued creating art, expanding beyond graphic design, into painting and mixed media work that often explored themes of identity and liberation. I deepened my relationship with Valerie, finding in her the supportive partnership I had never thought possible. And I continued my volunteer work helping others find their way out of situations similar to the one I had escaped. 3 years after the breaking point, both literally and figuratively, I held my first solo art exhibition. The centerpiece was a series of pieces depicting the journey from constraint to freedom, from pain to healing. I did not invite my family, choosing instead to share this milestone with the chosen family I had built around me. But on the final night of the exhibition, as I was speaking with a potential buyer, I looked up to see my mother standing quietly at the back of the gallery, taking in my work with tears in her eyes. Our eyes met across the room, and she gave a small, respectful nod before turning to leave, understanding that this was my space, my triumph, and she was there only as an observer, not as a participant. That moment crystallized the most important lesson I had learned through my journey. True healing does not always require reconciliation or forgiveness. Sometimes it simply requires the courage to walk away to build something new from the ashes of what was destroyed. My broken rib had long since healed. The physical scar faded to a thin silver line along my side. The emotional scars had transformed too, not disappearing completely, but becoming part of the tapestry of my identity. Reminders of my resilience rather than my victimhood. I had learned that family is not defined by blood, but by behavior, by consistent acts of love and respect. I had learned that setting boundaries is not selfish, but essential for survival. And most importantly, I had learned that sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away from those who cannot or will not value you, as you deserve to be valued. My journey continues each day as I build a life based on my own terms, free from the toxic patterns that once defined me. The pain of that night in my parents' kitchen has transformed into something unexpected, a catalyst for growth and change that ultimately led me to a better place than I could have imagined. If you are watching this and recognize aspects of your own family in my story, please know that you are not alone. Your pain is valid, your experiences are real, and you deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. Breaking free is terrifying and painful, but on the other side of that fear is a life where you can finally breathe without pain, where you can become the person you were always meant to be. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories of transformation and healing. Share your own experiences in the comments if you feel comfortable, and remember that your story matters too. Sometimes the family we create for ourselves is the one that truly helps us heal. Take care of yourselves, and remember that choosing your own well-being is never selfish, it is survival.